Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Today's question was suggested anonymously by a viewer, who also tells me that this one is part of the True Stories collection. Amy activates the minus ability of Minsc and Boo, sacrificing her Boo and choosing to deal damage to Nick's Spirit of the Labyrinth. What happens when that ability resolves? In particular, does Amy get to draw a card? Alright, so first of all, let's observe that because Amy is activating a Planeswalker ability, that probably means that it's her turn and she's already drawn a card during her draw step. So with that being the case, let's go on to analyze exactly what happens during the resolution of the Minsc and Boo minus ability. This is going to be a little bit trickier than a normal Planeswalker loyalty ability because we've got that reflexive trigger in there, but there's no reason to get intimidated. Okay, so when we have a spell or ability that's resolving any spell or ability, the general idea is you follow the instructions in the order that they're written down. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. First, Amy is going to sacrifice a creature. Then, that's going to cause the reflexive triggered ability to trigger. After the ability triggers, it has to go onto the stack. And that's the point when you have to say what you're targeting with a triggered ability, when you're putting it onto the stack. Now, a lot of the time when people are activating the Minsc and Boo ability, then they'll just say right out of the gate what they're planning on targeting, even though that's a little bit incorrect, technically speaking. I made a whole additional video where I talked about this ability in detail, including some information about why it's templated this way and what you would do in a situation where a player says the target beforehand and wants to change their mind afterwards. I recommend that you give that video a watch if you're interested in a little bit fuller explanation, but for now we'll say that there isn't any real complications with that step and the triggered ability goes on the stack just fine. So now that it's on the stack, the next step we'll say will be for that triggered ability to resolve. Of course, there is going to be an opportunity for people to respond to it just like any other triggered ability, but we'll say that it just goes on to resolve with no other interaction. So when that happens, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did before. We're going to follow the steps of that triggered ability in the order that they're written down. Triggered abilities that trigger like this in the middle of the resolution of another spell or ability with this sort of templating, those are called reflexive triggered abilities. So if you hear that term, that's what I mean. So when this reflexive triggered ability goes to resolve, we're going to perform the instructions in the order that they're written down. So first, that means that we're going to be dealing damage to the Spirit of the Labyrinth, and then Amy is going to be instructed to draw some cards. Now, here's an important fact, which is that the thing that makes lethally damaged creatures get destroyed, well, that would be a state-based action. And the important thing to know about state-based actions is that they are not performed during the resolution of spells or abilities. Rather, they wait until the spell or ability has completely finished resolving, in other words, after all of its instructions have been performed, to be applied. So what that means is that even though the Spirit of the Labyrinth now has lethal damage on it, it does not get destroyed until after all of the reflexive triggered abilities instructions have been performed. So that means that when Amy is going to be instructed to draw cards, that Spirit of the Labyrinth is still going to be on the battlefield, and that means that Amy will not be able to draw any cards because of that. Therefore, the answer for this question is going to be that Amy doesn't get to draw any cards because of the peculiarities of how this ability is worded and how the ability works. Okay, so now that I've got that sorted, I want to take a little bit of time to examine how things would be different if we had a Hullbreacher instead of a Spirit of the Labyrinth. And that's because pretty much any question that I ever do where I talk about how Spirit of the Labyrinth works, the top comment is almost always something like, well, how would it work if it was a Hullbreacher? And so that's a very fair question. You can see that the ability on Hullbreacher is similar to, but not exactly the same as what the Spirit of the Labyrinth says. And so a lot of the time that means that they'll work exactly the same, but a lot of the time it also means that they're going to be working completely differently because the small difference in how it's templated can lead to a big difference in what the answer is. So this actually happens to be one of those cases where those cards are going to function exactly the same in this situation. And the reason is because the core problem, the core issue that makes the answer be what it is, the fact that state-based actions are not going to destroy the lethally damaged creature until after all of the instructions for the reflexive trigger, including the part where Amy draws, have been completed, that part is going to be exactly the same. The game rules are going to work exactly the same in that situation. So even if the Hullbreacher is lethally damaged by the Minsc and Boo, that is not going to leave the battlefield until after the draw instruction has also been issued. And so that means that it will be in play to see Amy attempt to draw some cards, and it will stop that draw and replace it with Nick getting some treasure tokens. And that's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another daily ruling. But until then, I hope you have a great day.